All right, hey everybody. We are out here at Highland Hills actually, doing another testimony story for Bible study this week. Today I have David with me, and he's going to share a little bit of his story. So listen up.
Hey guys, kind of like any testimony, thankful for the opportunity, but it's got a beginning, so let's start there. I was born in Bryansk, Russia, and at the age of 3, I was adopted into a family that actually lives in Bloomington. So, this is kind of my home hill. Grew up here. I lived a pretty relatively normal childhood, but at the age of 7, I was introduced to pornography, which has a lot of, future implementation or whatever that big word is. But yeah, so from then on, kind of just got into it a little bit. At age 13, I was introduced to smoking weed, which turned out to be my vice. I didn't really do it too regularly, but then at the age of 16, everything kind of just went off the rails a little bit. Something like a light switch flicked or something, and I just stopped caring. Like, emotionally dead. Just really wasn't able to process things very much. I thought I was too smart for school. I didn't care about other people. I couldn't take responsibility for myself. There's a lot of anger built up. Just a lot of things that I didn't realize played into my adoption. And I guess first I should start by saying I did grow up in a Christian home. Kind of the whole grew up going to church, grew up knowing there was a God and believing that there was a God, but that God wasn't really for me. I kind of just wanted to do my own thing. He had too many rules, thought he was just strict. I didn't feel welcomed or wanted by him really, or accepted because of my past and just things that I did. And I've always struggled with the whole idea of not being in control. And when I smoked weed for the first time, that's kind of when I got my glimpse of being in control. And it just was able to help me slow down a little bit from everything. It's kind of hard to explain, but I was able to pick and sort my thoughts, and it just gave me this perception of being in control per se. So then from 16 to 17, I just started doing really bad in school. I didn't want to do anything. Again, like I said, I thought I was just too smart. Thought school was pointless, whatever the case may be. But then at 18, I was introduced to acid or LSD. And, that was kind of a trip, pun intended. And at this point, I just stopped going to church, stopped really wanting anything to do with anybody. I met a friend at plumbing school because, I had to do something with my life. I wasn't just going to be a burnout. But, so we kind of just sat in his basement and smoked weed and talked about how much we hated everything. And he wanted nothing to do with God as well. But so it kind of went on a very dark path, and then we were both introduced to acid at the same time. And at that point in my life, it was just, I didn't care. So I wanted something to make me feel good. I'd go home to my parents' house and, at 2, 3 in the morning, just reeking up the house and just being pissed whenever someone tried to say anything at me. Because, you have no idea. You have absolutely no idea what I'm going through. God doesn't even know. God doesn't care. Because they were very devoted to the Christian faith. And then at around 19, I started using acid regularly. And, that just made my brain go in all sorts of different directions at that time. And at that point, it was just, there were so many voices in my head. I didn't even know which one was mine. And again, it just opened up a lot of spiritual, like demonic portals and just demonic realms per se, that took me even farther away from Christ, because it was just, I was so focused on trying to please those voices in my head and ignore them. I would do anything I possibly could. And then May 4th, 2019, I was so sick of everything. I was pretty cool and calm and collected, like on the surface, but inside it was just a storm. And at that point, I just either wanted to stop doing drugs or I wanted to stop being alive, one or the other. So I took as much acid as I could get my hands on, which ended up relatively being around 30 tabs. And like being a regular user, it kind of, your tolerance grows, but 30 tabs is 30 tabs. It's pretty crazy. So at that point, I reached out to that God that, I knew existed, but I didn't know if it existed for me or not. And I left my body. I had a very, very intense out-of-body experience. One point, I was just surrounded by darkness, where it was like just this overwhelming understanding that this is what my life is. This is it's accounted to, and nothing, just absolutely nothing. Or in like acid terms, it's called the ego death. But then I got to experience the other side of it, where I was brought into the light. I was brought into God's like love and kindness and just care for the first time in my life, after reaching out to Him like in my darkest and lowest spot. It was like being encased in the most like warming hug you could ever be in. It just kind of, it made me aware that there was a God and that He did care about me. And from that point forward, I returned to my body, and I just saw everything in a completely different light. And I went home, woke up the next morning, and I was suddenly aware of like these colors. They actually had color in them, and I could actually feel emotion a little bit. Like I cared for the first time in a long time. And then shortly after that, I still struggled with smoking weed a little bit. But that kind of waned down as I started to find a church. And they taught me about what it's like to actually have a relationship with Him and pursue a relationship with Him, and what that looks like, and how it looks like to be in community with other people who are doing the same thing. And then a couple months went by, and then I kind of realized I needed to go to recovery, just to be around other people who struggled with drug addiction, amidst other mental health issues as well. And they revealed a lot to me in terms of like the spiritual side of things and how that kind of plays in, especially when you're opening different things you don't understand, yet in your pride and arrogance you think you understand, because when you're doing that kind of stuff, to you it makes sense, but it doesn't matter if it makes sense to anybody else. But then the skiing season came up, and I ended up hurting my knee towards the end of it, and started using again. I was, I think, 8 months sober from everything at that point, and almost immediately you could tell my mindset kind of went back into the same thing. I got depressed, which never helps. My relationship with God faltered. I stopped caring again and started, picking up the weed, and just to kind of numb myself from, woe is me, I can't do what I want, Still struggling with the control factor. And then I reached a tipping point again, I think in May or so, and I went and reached out to my pastor. I was like, hey, I'm doing this all wrong. I know I am. Like, this is not what God wants for me, and this isn't even what I want for myself anymore. And he ended up actually pointing me to JSAW at Help Workshop, and they had a Bible study on Thursday nights, and it was just, when I walked in there, it was that exact same feeling as when I left my body. It was like the immediate sense of warmth and the welcoming, and just like you could tell that people genuinely cared, and they had this like otherworldly compassion for you, because it wasn't focused on themselves, it was focused on something that created them, you know. And from there, just started to learn what it's like to be honest with yourself, and it's revealed a lot of things that have been hurting me internally inside, and to grow and heal from that. And I've had someone to walk through with it, and people to walk through with it who are in and pursuing that same relationship. And when I started actually picking up the Bible for myself and trying to understand what relationship I was really pursuing and why I was pursuing it, it started to change my brain and the way I thought, and just the way I pursued other relationships in my life as well. They started to grow in a different way. Like, they became more open, more honest, more vulnerable. I was able to share things from my past that, you know, to me were, you know, just very, you know, embarrassing things. But when I got to share them, they almost like took this burden off my chest of carrying it around. And yeah, I guess here I am in November, still working through a lot of that stuff, still relatively new to this whole pursuing Christ as a relationship thing. But in that year and a half, I have been so much more happy, so much more joyful. My emotions wouldn't be described as being emotionally dead. You know, my voice may be monotone, but, you know, it's a lot easier for me to transmit my emotions and be honest with them and just be true to myself in that, because I know that I'm seen for who I am. So it doesn't really matter my past, but, you know, it just keeps striving to be better and move forward. So yeah, thanks for listening, and have a good one.
Whoa, dropped the microphone, my bad. Thank you for sharing, David. It's an incredible story, and it relates to the passage that we're studying this week. It's in John chapter 5, verse 24. It says, "Very truly I tell you, whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and will not be judged, but has crossed over from death to life." And so it's like, in your story, you're talking about how you're emotionally dead, and like, you know, when you had that out-of-body experience and that vision, like you talked about, it was like you met Christ and you heard his word and you felt that warmth, and you passed from death to life.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're going to be talking about this week in Bible study. Thanks again for sharing your story, David, and we'll see all of you guys soon.